Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wasalam ala rasulillah. A critical question every truth seeker, everybody who wants to follow the truth, should ask themselves is that the scriptures that I'm going to base my belief, is it preserved in its original message, or is it something that has been altered or fabricated or written by men and attributed to God? This is very important because as a Christian, when you talk about Jesus dying on the cross or Judas betraying Jesus, how do you know these events happen? If you were not physically present there, you are relying upon the accounts that are in the Bible. Well, who wrote those accounts? Were those first-hand accounts? Were those written and preserved during the lifetime of the Prophet Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him? And were they faithfully preserved to our time? Are we reading accounts that really happened? Or are we reading accounts of anonymous authors who made up what they wanted to in whichever manner they want and without us knowing who they even were? Were they liars? Were they honest? Were they, people with political agenda? We don't know, right? So we need to know where did these books come from and how are they preserved through time. As a Muslim, when you say that Allah revealed the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, you need to make sure, can you prove that that Quran that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is the Quran that you're reciting today, that you're acting upon today, that you're ruling by today, or no? Now, any follower of any religion can just, say, I have blind faith. I just believe. It's a culture I was raised in, or I feel it, or Holy Ghost, whatever. But that's not a truth seeker. That's not somebody who really wants to follow that which is right. That's just somebody who wants to justify something. If you really do believe, then you should have knowledge on why you believe in what you believe. So let's begin a journey into the preservation of two holy texts, the Quran and the Bible. When we talk about the Bible, first thing we need to talk about is which Bible? Are there many Bibles out there? The Quran, and we'll talk about the Quran with the same type of scrutiny, but the Quran is well known to be one Quran, meaning if you go to China, or if you go to a Muslim household, or if you go to even sects like the Shia and Qadianiyya or whatever else, you will find Quran with 114 chapters, 30 juz, 30 sections, and you will find that they all begin with a surah, with a chapter called Al-Fatiha, and they end with a surah called An-Nas. Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter. An-Nas, mankind, is the name of the closing chapter. 114 begins with Al-Fatiha, ends with Nas, divided into 30 sections, anywhere in the world. The Bible is not the same. If you go to the Catholic Bible, you will find 46 books of the Old Testament, 27 books of the New Testament, for a total of how many? 73 books. On the other hand, if you go to the Protestant Bible, you will find 39 books of the Old Testament, 27 books of the New Testament, for a total of 66 books. Now, to be clear, this is not a difference in recitation. This is not a difference in pronunciation. It is not a difference in writing. It is not a difference, meaning styles of writing. This is not even translation. If you get an account in its original language, no doubt it will have a depth that a translation will not have. And that's why we say a lot is lost in translation. But if you find in the Bible that Judas betrayed Jesus, peace and blessings be upon Jesus, and then you translate that into Chinese, as long as you translate it correctly, you still have that message there. But when you have 73 books and 66 books, that means the additional books that you find in the Catholic Bible are not accepted as divine, as holy, as a part of the Bible by Protestants. So were those part of that divine message from God or not? Right? So this shows a difference. That's not all. Now we also have the Greek Orthodox Bible, the Russian Orthodox Bible. All of these have different chapters and verses, right? So which Bible is the true Bible? Which one is the Bible of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him? Which one has the true message that Jesus came with, peace and blessings be upon him? The Ethiopian Bible, for example, has 81 books. 81, more than Protestants and Catholics, right? You also have the Common Lectionary Revised. This is used by the Lutheran Church. And then you have the Book of Mormon, of course, which most Christians will reject, but Mormons will say this is a part of the Bible, right? So is that a part of the Bible or not? Right? This is something that needs to be researched. You have books in the Catholic Bible not found in the Protestant Bible, and I've listed them out here. Why is this important? Because it tells you that this process was a process, meaning that there were books and they were supposed to be holy texts, and Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, and others would go through and choose what they like or what they found to be authentic or so on, and make up their own Bible. This is not one Bible, right? You have books in the Russian and Georgian Orthodox Bible not found in the Protestant or the Catholic Bible. Now, are these a part of divine revelation? Yes, no. Which texts are authentic and so on. The Syriac Orthodox Bible also includes chapters that are not there or verses in the other Bibles. So for this, my research took me to look at what is the earliest manuscripts, right? Now, before we get into a manuscript of anything that would be remotely close to a complete Bible, let's just look at fragments of chapters. The most important chapters that most people talk about from the New Testament are the Gospels. What are the Gospels? The Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then you have Acts and Romans and so on, and I've listed some of them here. So the Gospel of Matthew, most people will say was written. I'm not talking about a fragment or a manuscript, but the date of its writing was 80 to 90 years CE, meaning after the time of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him. That means most biblical scholars will say that these accounts definitely were not written during the time of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him on the earth. Okay? The Gospel of Mark, 65 to 73 years. The Gospel of Luke, 80 to 90 years. Gospel of John, 90 to 110 years later. Acts, 80 to 90. You can look all this up yourself. But how old are the earliest manuscripts? Once again, I'm not talking about a manuscript that even comes close to a complete Bible. I'm just talking about fragments, shreds that would have even a part of each gospel, right? For that, the earliest known fragment for the Gospel of Matthew is 150 to 200 CE. The Gospel of Mark, 250. The Gospel of Luke, 175 to 250. The Gospel of John, 125 to 160. Acts, 250 CE. And so on and so on. Right? Romans, the earliest we have is late 2nd century or 3rd century. Right? We're talking about hundreds of years after the time of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, on this earth. So that means these were not first-hand reports written down during the lifetime of the prophet Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him. And that's why you will see that they were in Koine Greek. They were not written in the native Aramaic language that the disciples of Jesus would speak. Now, when I talk about this, many people may say, hey, why should we take your word for it? It's not my word. This is research that you can look up. But I will also present here the research of one of the best-known biblical manuscript scholars, meaning scholars that study and date and quantify the manuscripts of the Bible, and that is Dr. Bart Ehrman. Here's what he had to say about the earliest complete manuscripts of the New Testament.
How many manuscripts of the New Testament do we have from the first Christian century? None. From the decades after the books were written, how many do we have? The years afterwards, the decade, none. 0. How many do we have from the early 2nd century? Say, manuscripts that clearly date up to around the year 150. We have one scrap. This is it. This may look big because it's a big screen. This is the actual size. It's the size of a credit card. It's written on both front and back. It's from John chapter 18. It has several verses on it. You can see this little scrap has parts of 7 lines on it. It's a very important manuscript because it's the earliest one we have. It's the early 2nd century, and it is the only manuscript we have from the early 2nd century. That's it. How many complete manuscripts do we have from the 2nd and 3rd centuries? We're not just talking about decades now after these things were originally written and copied and mistakes made and mistakes replicated and then more mistakes made and more replicated. We're not talking about years or decades. We're talking about centuries. How many complete manuscripts do we have from the 2nd and 3rd centuries? None. Zero. Well, if we have 5,500 manuscripts, where are they from? When are they from? Well, 94% of our surviving manuscripts come from the 9th century and later. 94% come from the 9th century, which is great if you want to know what the Bible looked like when Christians were reading it in the year 890. But if you want to know how they were reading it in the year 70, you've got a problem, because you don't have manuscripts from that period.
Okay, so now we talk about the Codex Sinaiticus. This is the oldest Bible manuscript. It is not a complete manuscript. There are verses missing, but it is somewhat complete, meaning many of the books that we find in the Bible today are there with it. And this is compiled, as you have just heard, in the 4th century. 4th century. And this is not a complete manuscript either. In fact, many of the books that are found in the Codex Sinaiticus, including the Epistle of Barnabas and parts of the Shepherd of Hermas, these are not found in the Bible today, right? So that's interesting. And many of the things that are omitted in the New Testament today were found in the Codex Sinaiticus, and much of what has been added to the Bible is in today's version, that if you pick up a King James Version or a NSAIB or New International Version, whatever, you will find were not in the Codex Sinaiticus. And that's very interesting. Now, when we talk about the Bible, many Christians bring up the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is one of the first things. Oh, what about the Dead Sea Scroll? What about the Dead Sea Scroll? First thing to understand, that Dead Sea Scrolls are not the New Testament. We're not talking about what talks about Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him. This is for the Old Testament. And to understand that most of what has been produced or replicated that is available have been documented to be fabrications. I have an entire section in my library dedicated to the Bible, and I have a translation of Dead Sea Scrolls that were taken out, and they were translated by the Museum of the Bible. This later on was shown to be a fabrication. The Museum of the Bible houses 16 purported Dead Sea Scroll fragments. But a new scientific investigation funded by the museum itself confirmed that all 16 were modern-day forgeries. And you can research this yourself. You can look it up on their website. You can find their own research. They were sold to them, they were translated, they were put forward, and turned out that they were fabrications, and they admit to this. In fact, one of the researchers into the Dead Sea Scrolls, she's written a book, Molly Zahn. She writes a book, and in her book she writes about the genres of rewriting the Second Temple of Judaism, and she talks about the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found. And she said that these are scriptures that people took literally license to change the scripture. They added and subtracted as they wished. These are not Muslims. These are people who are dedicated scholars of the Old Testament or the Jewish Torah. And even they have said that the Dead Sea Scrolls, whoever authored them, who are anonymous, we still don't know who authored them, did take liberties to change what they wished. The Dead Sea Scrolls are dated between 200 BC and 70 AD. So this, again, if you're talking about the message of Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, we are nowhere close to the time of Moses. I mean, they may be the oldest scriptures that we do have, but they are nowhere close to the actual time of the prophet Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, nor are they authenticated. In fact, most people will say that most scholars who have studied it have said that these are forgeries. So again, we don't have those original scriptures. Having said that, who wrote these books? Who wrote Mark, Matthew, John, Luke? The truth is that they're anonymous. And this is not just something you should take my word. You should listen to what Dr. Bart Ehrman said about this as well.
Whoever wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did not claim to be Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. Those are titles given to the books later by editors. The books themselves don't make any claims, so they're actually anonymous. And so in this case, these would be called false ascriptions rather than forgeries. But scholars for a long time have argued that they weren't really written by Matthew and John, two of Jesus' disciples, and Mark and Luke, companions of the apostles, that in fact the disciples of Jesus were probably Aramaic-speaking, illiterate peasants who couldn't write. These books are written in a very high-level Greek by people living 30 or 40 years later.
Okay. Now that we've discussed the Bible and we've looked at the anonymous nature of much of that which has been written and the late dating of many of the manuscripts, you can see clear numeric contradictions. And we have pointed them out in many videos on the One Message Foundation channel. You can look through them. And that tells you that these were different authors writing at different times, putting together a work, and that's why you have people's opinions. And as it is natural, when you have witnesses that give their own opinion, not a divine message, they're going to have contradictions between their analysis or their recalling of events. That means this is not the Word of God. These are accounts of people that were transmitted over time, changed, edited, written by people that were not present themselves. That's why these are Gospels according to Matthew, according to John, or not actually of Luke or Mark or John or Matthew. What about the Quran? What if we take the Quran and put it through the same type of scrutiny? There is only one Quran. And we'll talk about the different Qur'an, different recitations and things in a minute. Every Quran, and I encourage everybody that when you travel around the world, go to a mosque or go to a place where there's the Quran and pull one off the shelf and check. Check how many chapters are in that Quran. Unlike what we found as the differences between the Catholic Bible and the Protestant Bible and the Greek Orthodox Bible and the Russian Orthodox Bible and the Ethiopian Bible with different numbers of chapters, different contexts, the actual word counts, the actual chapters were different. The accounts that are there in the Catholic Bible that were not in the Protestant Bible and so on, you will not find that in the Quran. 114 chapters no matter where you go. 30 juz. Juz are the ajza, sections of the Quran. So there are multiple chapters in one juz usually, except for the earlier surah, which the earlier chapters are long, so sometimes the beginning of every Quran, after you look at this, look at the beginning of every Quran. Pick up a Quran anywhere in the world and look at where does it begin. It begins with Al-Fatiha. This is the opening chapter. You will never find one that doesn't. And it will end with An-Nas, with Surah An-Nas, right? Fatiha, the opening chapter, An-Nas, which translates into the people, and this is a chapter in the Quran that the Quran ends with. You will find no differences between sects, meaning that even if somebody follows a deviant sect, they still will be using the same Quran, even if they don't act upon the teachings. That's up to the people. But you will not find a Shia Quran and a Sunni Quran and a Deobandi Quran no. The Quran is one Quran. It has been agreed upon, meaning the Muslim Ummah, the Muslim nation, have agreed upon this Quran since the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And I know the accusations that are put forward, and we'll address them today, inshallah. So how can we say that this Quran is the Quran that was preserved from the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and agreed upon till our time? The first method of preservation of the Quran that we do not find with the Bible, Old Testament or New Testament, is memorization. Hafdul Quran, or the people who memorize the Quran. Amongst the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So we're talking about while the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was alive, we have historic documentation, and all of these are documented, checked, sanadan, authenticity wise, and so on. You can look at Al-Itqan of As-Suyuti, you can look at Tabaqat al-Qur'a of Al-Dhahabi, and so on. You will find the documentation. Where does it say in a historically verified hadith report that this companion memorized the entire Quran? And I have given references in other lectures to Ibn Majah and other books that with the chain of transmission record this. So who do we have from the companions that memorized the entire Quran? Now, the Bible as we see it, these accounts, even if you take a very fundamentalist Christian point of view, many of the authors never met Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, in person, right? Many of them were later authors. So that means that there is no way that the entire Bible as we see it today, for example, the King James Version, could have been memorized by anybody during the lifetime of Jesus upon this earth, peace and blessings be upon him, because at that time, before he was taken up, at that time, these books that are today put forth were not even written, right? Paul was still Saul at that time, right? So all of that happened after the time of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, that was on earth. Now, the Injil, the message that was revealed to the Prophet Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, in his native language, no doubt was there. But that is not the same as the book called the Bible today. This book, as we have shown, was compiled by anonymous authors hundreds of years later, the earliest manuscript being in the 4th century, most of the manuscripts being in the 6th and 7th century, and so on. So, unlike that, the actual companions that were physically there memorized the entire Quran from the first chapter, Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter, to Surah An-Nas, the last chapter, in the presence of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. First of them being Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu anhu. Now, we know details about them. For example, look at Mark and Matthew and Luke. We don't know much about them. We don't know, most of them, we don't know a last name for them. We don't know who their father was. We don't know. Abu Bakr, for example, what is his name? His name is Abdullah. His kunya, or a nickname that was given, was Abu Bakr, but his actual name is Abdullah. What's his father's name? His father's name is Uthman. Not the same Uthman, that's the Khalifa, that's the Caliph, but his father's name was Uthman. His kunya was Abu Quhafa, right? We know his daughters like Asma and Aisha. We know who he married. We know about his sons. We know about his grandfather. We know about his history. We know where he lived, how he lived, his honesty, and so on. And he was the first caliph after the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And so we know all this detail about these people as well, which you would not find for those that are referenced in the Bible. Then you have Umar ibn al-Khattab, Abu al-Hafs, Umar, the great companion, the second caliph, also memorized the entire Quran during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Then you have Uthman ibn Affan, also called Dhul Nurayn, the great Sahabi, the great companion, the third caliph. He also memorized and was a scholar of the Quran, and he memorized it from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, directly. We have Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib, the great companion, Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was the Khalifa, the 4th Khalifa, and he was also the son-in-law, as was Uthman, of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. On top of that, we know that Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, was also the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was raised in the household of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was the first of the youth to accept Islam, and he memorized the Quran with the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, from the beginning to the end. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abu Huraira, whose actual name is Abdurrahman ibn Sakhar. We have Zayd ibn Thabit, who's the one that worked on compiling the Quran. Abu Darda. We also have Abdullah ibn Sahib. We also have Abdullah ibn Umar, the son of Umar ibn Khattab. We have Abdullah ibn Abbas. We have Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As. Then we have Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. She memorized the Quran in the household with the Prophet ﷺ, from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and she had memorized the entire Quran. We have Hafsa radiallahu anha. We also have, who's also a wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him. We have Salama. These are people, women who had memorized the entire Quran. Abu Musa al-Ashari, the great companion, Mu'adh ibn Jabal. You have Salim, the Mawla of Abu Hudayfa. You have Uqba ibn Amir. And you have Ubay ibn Ka'b. Ubay ibn Ka'b was a great scholar of the Quran, of the recitation of the Quran. Now, these were companions that memorized the Quran. Some of them also wrote the Quran, like Zayd ibn Thabit, meaning that they had memorized it and they had physically taken notes. Like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud had his own notes, but that is not an official copy of the Quran, that's just his personal notes. We also have others like Ubay ibn Ka'b and others who would write down the Quran. The official compilation of the Quran as a book format we'll talk about. But these companions wrote down the Quran and memorized it during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So that is the first method that we're going to talk about, is the preservation through memorization. So okay, these companions memorized it, but how did it get to us? Well, the first thing is what we call al-isnad, meaning the chain of accreditation. We have people till today that have ijazat. They have ijaza in the Quran. What does that mean? That means that they memorized the Quran and they recited the Quran to those who had memorized the Quran to be able to be accredited that they memorized it correctly with the proper pronunciation and with the proper wording, making sure you didn't miss anything. This system has been there since the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, till our time. And this is a challenge to any Christian Jew that can show us a sanad, a chain of who has memorized the entire Bible all the way back to the time of the Prophet Jesus, peace and blessing be upon him. It cannot exist, because this compilation that you call the Holy Bible today was not there in the time of the Prophet Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him. And nobody memorized it and taught it to anybody else who memorized it. This is just based on manuscripts, which again, the earliest somewhat complete one is going to be 4th century, right? You have 350 years about where you passed that lifetime, right? Even if you take 300 years, that's a long time. Who told who wrote down what for 300 years until we got to a manuscript that we're basing something upon. And who wrote that manuscript? We don't know. But in this case, we know. Here we have a picture, obviously, of children and young men memorizing the Quran. And you will find that there are millions, not exaggerating, millions of students that memorize the Quran letter by letter, word by word, even its pronunciation. And they can show their chain, as you will see on the left side of your screen. This is a written sanad. This is a chain of ijaza, of the accreditation given to somebody who memorized the Quran. So what does it show? It shows the one who memorized. Who did they memorize it from? Who did they memorize? Who accredited them that their recitation is correct? Who accredited them? Who accredited them all the way back to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and from him to Jibreel, from Jibreel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Millions of people, millions, and they're without disagreement, meaning that nobody memorized the Quran and says, Surah Al-Baqarah, it's not in the Quran. Oh, of course, these are agreed upon, and we memorize this Quran till our time. This is one way. I'm going to give you an example of such a chain, and this is an actual example. You will find on the right hand side of the screen with Bakri bin Abdul Majid, and this is his sanad, who he memorized from. Each teacher going all the way back. If you look at number 25, that's Hafs al-Kufi, right? Hafs, who did he memorize it from? Asim. And this is a style of recitation from Abdullah ibn Habib, from Uthman ibn Affan, the companion Uthman ibn Affan, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, the companion Ali ibn Abi Talib, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the companion, and Ubay ibn Ka'b, and Zayd ibn Thabit. So we can show you a connected chain, right? From people in our time all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, those companions. the great Khalifa Uthman, Ali, radiyallahu anhuma, also Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Zayd ibn Harith that are mentioned here, who did they memorize? They memorized it directly from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who received this from Jibreel, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have this chain, and this is an actual example. Millions of people have these asanid around the Muslim world. Right? So if anybody made a mistake, you have millions of people that have been accredited and they will check that mistake. If you see people who recite the Quran, for example, in Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan, leading the Taraweeh prayer, if a Qari makes a mistake, you will have 10 people standing behind him ready to correct him. Why? Because we have memorized the Quran, so we don't have this issue of whether this verse is in a manuscript or not, because it's been memorized. But we also have the second method that the Quran was preserved, which is the manuscripts. And we're going to talk about carbon dating, right? Because one thing is to say that this manuscript written in a certain font and a certain style and so on, but then you have the use of modern technology when you look at carbon dating, which gives you a range. It's not exact science, but it does give you a range, and sometimes you have a 97, 98% accuracy, and that's they will tell you this 75% accuracy, this range, 100%, whatever percentage is given. So when you talk about manuscripts, one of the first manuscripts we'll talk about is something that is not held today by any Muslim country or a Muslim library or Muslim scholar. This is something that is in the United Kingdom in England, and it is in Birmingham, and it's famously known as the Birmingham Quran manuscript. This is a partial manuscript. It has been carbon dated to be between 568 and 645 with a confidence of 97.2%. That's a pretty good confidence, right? So we carbon date this with the range. That range puts it within the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And if you look at the middle range and you look at the likelihood, they said better than a 75% likelihood that this is going to be past 610, meaning past the time when the wahi began, towards the later time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, into the Khilafah of the end of the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab. Right? So that means the middle range is going to put him right at the end of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, or at best into the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, right? Because the end is going to go toward the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab. So that means that this manuscript, to the best accuracy of carbon dating, is from the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. It's not a complete manuscript. This is a partial manuscript, but it's a very important manuscript. Why? Because it does put this into the lifetime of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And if we can recite from it and see that it is exactly as the Quran that we have printed in the shelves today, it does give you a very strong level of confidence. And that is the case. And I'll give an example here. This is from a Surah Dawah, and this is one of the chapters of the Quran that is in this manuscript. And you will find on your right a highlighted section from the manuscript itself. Underneath that, it's typed out with the English translation as well. On the left of it, you will find the common prints of the Quran, meaning the Quran is printed in different fonts. It's the same Quran, but it's printed in different fonts. The common print that you will find for most Arabic speakers is called the Medina print. You will see it on top, Taha, and you will see Ma anzalna alayka al-Quran litashqa. You will see it, and you can, if you are able to know the surah well, you can recite it the same from the manuscript, right? Underneath, you will find the Persian or the Urdu font, as some people call it. And this, again, is just a different style of writing. It gives you more of the vowelation for the vowels and the what we call mudud, how to stretch and so on, markings. But again, it's the same. You see, Taha, ma anzalna alayka al-Quran litashqa. Same thing here, right? So that tells you that the printed Quran that we have on the manuscript can be shown to be exactly recited from what we find in a manuscript that is carbon dated to the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Okay, what else do we have? This is a manuscript currently held in Germany. Again, somebody, if it's held in a Muslim country, we'll talk about those that are in Muslim countries. People may say, oh, the carbon dating was biased, or something, but these are held by non-Muslims that have run their own scientific research in carbon dating. The Tübingen manuscript in Germany is in November 2014. It was using radiocarbon dating. This was revealed that the Quran manuscript that was held there to be between 649 and 675. Now, this dates it to the Khilafah. If you look at the middle range, you're going to be, no doubt, towards the end of the Khilafah of Uthman radiallahu anhu, because his Khilafah began in 644, right? So, now you have a mushaf that can be taken. And Uthman radiallahu anhu's Khilafah was 12 years. So you have a period of time here that, if you look at it, will bring it to the latter part of the Khilafah of Uthman ibn Affan, the companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that standardized and sent out manuscripts to the Muslim world. And we'll talk about how that happened. But this manuscript can be carbon dated to his time. And as I said, you can recite from it. There have been dots added to it, because you can see the dots weren't in the original manuscripts. The original manuscripts have no dots, and even these dots are not the dots to differentiate between letters, but rather pronunciation, and we'll talk about that. Other manuscripts. You have the Samarkand Manuscript. This is held in Tashkent in Uzbekistan. It is written in the Kufic script, which is to be the standard script used during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Kufic and Hijazi scripts, and it has been radiocarbon dated to be between 593 and 855, and that's a pretty big range. But if we take around the middle of it, it will put us around 651. So they say that the examination suggests that it was written around 651, which again puts it during the Khilafah of Uthman ibn Affan. We know that Uthman standardized and sent copies out to the different parts of the Muslim world. So what is apparent as both of these were from the copies that were sent out by Uthman ibn Affan, and from that time till today we have those manuscripts. We have the Sana'a manuscript in Yemen, and this is a very important manuscript because you have here a radiocarbon dating that puts it at 95% accuracy to be before 669 and 75% probability that it was before 646, which would be again in the beginning of the Khilafah of Uthman ibn Affan. Even if you take a little bit of the later time, it will still put it to be from the time of Uthman ibn Affan. The Sana'a manuscript is very complete. It has lots of the Quran there, so we know that this entire Quran was copied, standardized, and sent out by Uthman ibn Affan. Then we have other manuscripts like the one that's housed in Turkey. This is a 99.3 complete, meaning there's only a few verses missing. Otherwise, the rest of the entire Quran, as we see it on the shelves today, is there. And it is in the Kufic script. And the method has been attributed to Abu Asad al-Duhali in its style of pronunciation that has been for the writing. So it's been suggested that this was during the Khilafah of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the great companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who was also the son-in-law and cousin of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So again, we have all of these manuscripts. Manuscripts are only one tool though, right? Because within these manuscripts, they can all be carbon dated to the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. If we take these manuscripts together, we have 100% of the Quran that we have today, and it can be recited and shown. Even if some of them, the writing styles are different. These are all Kufic scripts, and we'll talk about other scripts, but the Quran is there. Now, but since it was memorized, this is only an additional proof, because with the memorization of the Quran, word by word, letter by letter, even the pronunciation being preserved, then no doubt with that and the manuscripts, we can be 100% accurate and sure that this is the message that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Now we have the issue that many people bring up today, where they claim there are multiple Qur'ans and different numbers are thrown out, 40 and 39 and 50 something, and it's strange, because they talk about the ahruf and the qira'at. The ahruf and the qira'at, the different styles, dialects, and styles of recitation. So let's discuss this. And this is a very deep subject. Today's video is not going to be that deep. I want to make, inshallah, a video dedicated to this subject to discuss all the different opinions and evidences. But today we will discuss it in a summarized manner. Differences in dialects. Let me explain what that means first. Because when you talk about the differences in the Bible, if we look at, for example, within the Protestant Bibles, we look at the New World Translation of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you look at the King James translation that's used, you will find that there are verses that are different, meaning that a verse does not contain wording that another verse has, or a verse is omitted because it was not found in certain manuscripts. New revised editions like NSAIB and others have taken out certain verses that you will find in the King James Version. You will also find these changes between other translations and updates and new editions and so on and so on. That is telling you the different wording, different verses, different content, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about methods of recitation, accents, right? So let's talk about dialects. In British English, you could say that we go on holidays. If people in the United Kingdom go, they say, I'm going to go on holiday. In America, we would not. We would say we go on vacation. Now, these are different words that are used for the same thing in different dialects. They do not change the meaning. Whether you go on holiday or vacation, either way, you're going to be off and out there with your family, having fun or whatever you're doing. But these are different dialects, right? For example, in the United Kingdom, they say we live in a flat. Well, in America, we would not understand that. We would say we live in apartments. Flats, apartments. Again, the meaning is the same. In the British English, you will find that collective nouns can be plural, meaning that they will say the team are playing tonight. Now, as an American, that's wrong. It sounds wrong to me because in America, we do not say that. In American English, collective nouns are singular. So we would say in America, the team is playing tonight. Now, if you say the team are playing tonight or the team is playing tonight, whether you use collective nouns to be plural or singular, it does not change the meaning. In the end, that meaning that this is a team, it's not an individual, and they are playing. That's it, right? These are just different styles, different dialects of conveying the same message. Brits would say, I have never got caught, right? But in America, we would say, I have never gotten caught, or I've never been caught. Okay? In British spelling and American spelling, there are differences. Same word, same meaning, color, right? But in the United Kingdom, they would spell it C-O-L-O-U-R. And in America, we would spell it C-O-L-O-R. Which one's right? It doesn't matter. That's not the point. They're both right, depending whose dialect are you writing in, right? Does it change the meaning? No, still color, whether you add that U or not, right? And then again, of course, within the United Kingdom and within America, we have different accents and so on, but I'm not even going to go there. Honor, right? It will be spelled in the United Kingdom with H-O-N-O-U-R. In America, it will be H-O-N-O-R. Does that make it a different word? Nope. Does that change meaning? No. It's just the way it's written in the United Kingdom and in America. Labor, same thing is true. So these are difference in dialects. These do not, this is not saying different number of verses, different chapters, different meaning. No, this is not a numeric contradiction where somebody's 8 or 18 or 22 or 42. This is just styles of conveying the same message. I'll give you an example. Shakespeare. You have a line from Shakespeare, under the color of commending him, I have to access my own love to prefer. You can find the same line written in America, and you will find a difference that is barely noticeable, but you can notice it, which is there's a U in the word color that is not there in the American print of Shakespeare's work. Now, can you say that this is a contradiction? It is not. This is just different ways of writing the same message in different accents. I'll give you another example. This letter here on your screen, this is called khin in Pashto or Pukhto in the language. This is a letter. This letter can be pronounced two different ways by two different schools within the Pashto language. I don't mean just dialects in an area. You have the Eastern Pashtuns, whether in Afghanistan or Pakistan, Jalalabad or Peshawar, they will use this as khin, right? And then you have the Western Pashtuns, whether in Afghanistan or Pakistan, whether in Kandahar or Quetta, they will use this as sheen, right? So if you said the word Pashto, as I have written here, in its native Pashto, the same letter, again, same meaning, same language, same letter, it will be pronounced Pashto by the Western Pashtun language and Pukhto by the Eastern. Neither is right or wrong, neither changes meaning. This is methods of recitation. Now, Peshawar, the city of Peshawar, if you use the Western Sheen pronunciation of the same letter, they will say Peshawar. But if you use the Eastern Khin pronunciation, it will be Peshawar, as you can see. Same letter, written the same way, just different ways of pronouncing. Pukhtana, right? Pushtana, same letter, pronounced differently. This does not change meaning, the word, or anything like that. Same letter, pronounced differently. If you look at British and American English, and I'm giving these examples to show that this is just there's a difference between recitations and contradictions. Now, the word herb, in America we pronounce it herb. In the United Kingdom, it will be herb. They will pronounce the H. Now, what's interesting, what I've given here with the word herb, tomato, and was, is the transliteration that shows you the vowel symbols, how to pronounce. And this is the difference that you will find within the qira'at in the Quran as well. Right? In English today, we don't use these. We just write H-E-R-B, and people will pronounce it herb. Or in America, the H will be silent. We will see the H, but we'll pronounce it herb. Like the K in night or the K in knife and so on. We will write it that way, but we will know. If you see pale, it'll be written, and we know that it's pronounced pale, right? Sometimes the E at the end will not elongate, and we don't put those lines unless somebody is not native to the English language, and sometimes in dictionaries and things, and they will use those markings for pronunciation. So tomato, famously, you will say in America tomato, and in the United Kingdom tomato. Is it a different word? No. Is it spelled differently? No. But it is pronounced differently. And if we were to put the symbols, as you can see at the end of tomato and tomato, for elongation and pronunciation, then they would look different, right? But they are the same word. Was or ways, yogurt or yogurt, pitta or pita, so on and so on. You will find the difference in pronunciation. Now, getting to the Quran. What are the ahruf and what was the need for having different styles of recitation? This is not something that Muslims years later came up with, or some scholars sat there somewhere and tried to come up with the definition. No, we find in the Jamia or Sunan of Imam al-Tirmidhi in hadith number 2944, which is a sahih or authentic hadith, Ubay ibn Ka'ab radiallahu anhu reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the Prophet of Allah, Messenger of Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, met Jibreel and said, "O Jibreel, I have been sent to an unlettered nation. Among them are the people with disabilities, the elderly, the young boys and young girls, and men who have never read a book." What does this mean? This means that many of the Arabs were not literate. Many of them were not scholarly. Some of them were poets. Some of them could read and write. Some of them, like Umar ibn Khattab, he was able to read and write and so on. But many of them could not. So they had their dialects of the Arabic language. And for them, especially those who were Bedouins or from areas that didn't intermix with people with different dialects a lot, it would be very difficult for them to pronounce things and mention things in one way. I'll give you an example. I was in South Africa, and I am a regular person, just a beginning student, but out of their respect, many of the people there would call me Sheikh, and they would say, "How is the Sheikh?" And they're speaking to me directly, but they're referencing me in third person. How is the Sheikh, right? And us in America, this was very different for us because we don't, when we're speaking to somebody, we don't reference them in third person. So when they would tell me, "How is the Sheikh?" I would be like, well, which Sheikh are we talking about? Because obviously it's not me. I'm not a Sheikh to begin with. And even if you're trying to show respect because you're using third person, I would be like, which Sheikh are we talking about? And they would be like, well, we're asking about you. And I'd be like, well, why are you speaking in third person? And they would say, this is the way we speak. In America, we would not. We would be like, hey, how are you? Right? How are you doing? Right? Now, when you have such differences, when you would either use second or third person and so on, or direct, and those are ingrained in you, meaning that this is an accent that you have really been raised with, then it's very difficult for you to say it in a different manner. I'll give you an example. Today in Arabic, there are people, for example, in Egypt, that pronounce the letter Jim as Gim, right? So masjid would become masjid, and Jama'ah would become Gama'ah, and Jannah would become Ganna. Many Egyptians, because they are people who travel internationally and deal with people, they are able to switch it on and off. Meaning when they're speaking to somebody who's Egyptian, they will use the Gim. When they're speaking to somebody from a different country or who speaks a different language, or if they're speaking Fusha, the classic Arabic, they will pronounce the Jim. But many of the farmers, many of the people who are from the areas, the Sa'idis, and the people who are from the outskirts, it is so strong with them that they will not even notice it. If you speaking to them and they say masjid and you say you mean masjid, they will say, that's what I said, masjid. And you're like, no, you didn't say masjid, you said masjid. And he goes, that's what I said, masjid. And you'll be like, no, okay, never mind, right? So in their mind, they cannot, because of that development of their tongue and their jaw and their mind structure, they cannot change it. Now, Arab had the same thing. You had different bodies of developments, not just accent, not just lahjat or lisan or Quraysh or so on, but different areas for different tribes that developed their tongue in a certain way. So when the Quran was revealed in one way of the Arabic language, right, it was very difficult for people who were not used to that way to pronounce it and keep it accurate. And this is the words of Allah. So Allah, out of His mercy, and here we see Jibreel alayhi salam saying to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and the Quran has been revealed in 7 readings, 7 styles, dialects. This is the harf that we talked about. Now, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu related from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, Jibreel taught me in one style, in one harf, in one style of recitation, and I reviewed it with him until he taught it to me in more, meaning one style was revealed, it was perfected, then the other styles were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. That's very important, because through mutawatir, through numerous chains, we can verify that the 7 ahruf were all revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, meaning from Allah through Jibreel to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. All of them are from Allah. All those styles of reciting, whether it has differences in taqdeem wa ta'khir or differences in takhfim wa tarqiq, and we'll talk about what these are, all of that is from Allah. None of that is a companion's recitation or his idea or somebody later on. These are all from Allah. So Jibreel taught me one style, one harf, and I reviewed it with him until he taught me more, and I kept asking him for more, and he gave me more until finally they reached 7 styles, 7 ahruf. And this is in Bukhari and Muslim, they're authentic narrations. Okay, so what is a harf? And there are many opinions, and again, I'm not going to get into the scholarly discussions, but just talk about what is the most correct opinion of this. And we can go back to the meaning of the harf from the Quran itself. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ. And there are people من يعبد الله, they worship Allah على حرف, يعني upon a edge. This is in the Quran, right? So what does Allah tell us about these people? That they worship Allah on uncertainty, that they're on the edge, right? They're not certain, they're not sure, okay? So the word harf here, which can be used for a letter, like ahruf can be used for letters in Arabic today, but in the Quran it is used for the edge of a spectrum, right? So this is a beautiful tafsir or explanation from the Quran itself. So what does that tell us? We know from the earlier ahadith that the ahruf or the different styles had to do with people being able to recite it easily. So it does have to do with recitation. And we don't see it as just the harf of Quraysh. For example, when Uthman radiyan said to document and to what to give preference when you have disagreements, he said lisan al-Quraysh. He didn't say harf al-Quraysh, right? So that means it's not just the accent of one tribe. Because if you look at the Arab tribes, and that's why I've given this map here, look at Banu Tamim and Banu Bakr, Banu Kulayb, and Banu Tha'lab and others, Banu Salim, and all of them here, you will find that there were many tribes. And much of the differences between their accents are still present in the Quran today. And we have a hadith where Abu Bakr radiyan, for example, he asked the Prophet ﷺ about a meaning of a word that the Quraysh didn't regularly use that's in the Quran. And one of the research that I did during my master's time was on the different accents from the different Arabic tribes that are still present in the Quran. And I had found 11 at the time. I found more than 20 after that. And it is well known that there were more than 40 different accents amongst the Arab tribes in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. But these tribes have general harf, meaning that they have general bodies of development, edges of a spectrum, right? Now, take it back to the example I gave about the United Kingdom in America. Generally, there is British English and American English. These are, you could call this a harf, the harf of the United Kingdom and the harf of the United States. Then within that, you're going to have smaller accents. You have the Boston accent. You have, how you all doing from the South? You got the Californian accent. You got the New York accent. You got all these different accents within that. But in the end, they will follow certain general, we will all in America use C-O-L-O-R. That's the spelling we will use. But then we'll have our own little differences between different areas. United Kingdom, if you look at the harf of the United Kingdom, for example, you will find the same thing. All of them will use C-O-L-O-U-R, right? Now that's going to be common. That's the harf that they have. But then within them, you have the, the London accent, you have the Irish accent, you have the Scottish accent, you have central United Kingdom like Manchester and so on. They have their own accent. Liverpool, if you go up to Cardiff, all of them will have their own unique dialects, but they will be under that basic English harf, right? South Africa, for example, will have the same thing. Cape Town will have something different from Durban and from Johannesburg, Joburg, or whatever, but they will have their own basic structure. So the Arabs had the same thing. And the 7 would be different things that would then accommodate all of them, right? Some of them would be how to, for example, some Arab tribes, like Hudayl and others, they did not have the Hamza, the letter Hamza. You go, you will not find it. And that's why in the Musaf Uthman radiyan anhu, you will not find the letter Hamza written like that, right? Some tribes had it, some didn't. And between the different recitations, it will accommodate all of those different ones. So it would become easy for somebody who was from Banu Azd, right? Azdi, to be able to pronounce it in their general dialect, as it would be easy for somebody from Banu Tha'lab to be able to recite it in their general dialect, right? Without having any of them, Jurham and other tribes, unable to recite the Quran. So you can preserve the meaning within what was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. What is important is all of these are from Allah. These are not the deduction of men. This is all from Jibreel to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, originating from Allah, the words of Allah, all of them, all of these ahruf. Now, when the Quran now was written down, it was written down in a script, and now generally when we write the Quran, this is what we call the Rasam Uthman, right? But this is the original writing is in a very simple script, and you will see it on your left side of your screen now. Here you see that there are no dots, right? So the letter Ba does not have a dot, right? In Bismillah here. And Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, no dots, right? Malik, you look at the style of writing, right? It is Mim, Lam, Kaf. That's it. There is no mad, there is no elongation alif here to make it Malik. It's just Mim, Lam, Kaf. Now, can you recite this, what's on your left, with a stretched Malik? Of course you can, because these are mudud, these are letters of elongation. Can you also pronounce it Malik? Yes, because these recitations were there amongst the Arab tribes. Malik, in Malik, although there is a meaning that we see here of king and owner and so on, but again, it comes from Malaka. It comes from the same root word and denotes ownership or power over and so on. So as some tribes would say that the owner of the Day of Judgment is the Malik al-Yawm al-Din, others would say Malik al-Yawm al-Din. They would stretch it a little bit more, but it gave the same meaning. So now when we look at the Mus'haf, the Quran, as was compiled during the time of Uthman, standardized during the first generation, during the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and sent out to the different parts of the Muslim world, it was written in such a way that you could recite with the different ahruf, the different styles, still using that Mus'haf, right? And then as time progressed, because the Arabs were very good in Arabic, they didn't need dots. They knew what that letter was. Just like today in English, we don't put lines for elongation and so on because we know the word. But because many non-Arabic speakers became Muslim and they had to read the Quran and they were not so fluent, for them, then they started to put these signs to show where to elongate, where to use takhfim and tarqiq, where to make it a full mouth letter and where to make it a light letter pronounced in different ways. And you will see on the right in different coloring, now you see the addition of just markings for how to pronounce. It does not change the Quran or the meaning or the words, and different styles. This is Al-Maghribi script, and we'll talk about that, inshallah, Andalusi scripts on the right-hand side. Now, we always hear that what about the Warsh Quran and the Harf Quran? And this is just foolishness to think that these are two different Quran. Warsh, Hafs, all of these recitations will go back to one Quran. The Mus'haf, the Quran, compiled, standardized, and different copies sent to different parts of the Muslim world by Uthman ibn Affan, the Khalifa. Any recitation that is not in accordance with that is rejected. So, if you look at now the printing of this, if you look on the left on the original, as we had talked about in the time of Uthman, how it's written, now when we print that with the vowel sounds and the elongation markations of how to pronounce, you will see that people will add a line, straight up line for extending the sound, or put a straight line across like a slash, which is called a fatha, and in different recitations also called zabar, or one underneath, which is called a kasra, right, which is also called a zair, or a wow looking mark, which is called a dhamma or a pesh, right? These are added in just to be able to help somebody pronounce, right? All of these are not found in the Mus'haf Uthman, because the Mus'haf Uthman is the actual word just by itself. These are added to help with pronunciation. They don't change the meaning, they don't change the letter itself, but just help in pronunciation. So you will see, as I have put a circle around, in the recitation, again, this is only one Quran, but in the recitation of Warsh, you will see Malik. It's Mim with the Fatha, Lam with the Kasra, and Kaf with the Kasra, Malik. In the recitation of Hafs and Asim, you will find Malik. Right? The meme now has a standing line, which is the alif here for elongation, to elongate the sound. Maliki Yawmiddin. Both can be recited from the original. There is no such thing as a Warsh Quran and a Qalun Quran. Those are just prints with those harakat or tashkil, those markings, and how to pronounce according to that recitation to aid you in being able to pronounce the words correctly. But there is only one Quran. And that one Quran, Uthman, when he standardized, how was the Quran put together? In the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, the Quran was memorized and written. Not just memorized, it was written on leather, on sheets that were made out of bones and so on, parchments that were taken, they were written down. These were all written during the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and they were memorized, word by word, letter by letter, the whole Quran by many of the companions. We gave the names of them earlier, right? Not just them, many more other than them as well. Then, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, passed away, in the first year after his death, during the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu here, whose Khilafah was only 2 years and a few months, during that time, they started this effort to put together a standard copy, one copy written, right away. And in the Khilafah of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, that one standard copy was made, right? Which all of the companions, Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu, the great companion, with the other companions who had memorized the Quran, came together, taking witness 2 per verse from written and from memorized preservation, meaning that from a written manuscripts and from people who had memorized it, taking double witness, they came together with a formal written manuscript of the Quran that became the standard from that early time. Now, there was only one, and that was with Abu Bakr, and then during Umar's time with Umar, and then after that with Hafsa radiallahu anha. During the Khilafah now of Uthman ibn Affan, because all these styles and ahruf and styles of recitation were there, and people, the Muslim Ummah had spread out, people were concerned that now people will start to argue and debate because that one Mus'haf is only there in Medina. So Uthman radiallahu anhu now brought the same companion Zayd ibn al-Thabit radiallahu anhu, and he collected the companions again, and with the consensus of the companions. Now, if a companion, for example Ibn Mas'ud or others, forgot a verse or something like this, that is the particular companion. But Ibn Mas'ud had his own manuscript. This is his own personal writing. He put supplications and other things on there. That's just his writings. Ibn Ka'b had his own. Ibn Abbas had his own. But the official standard one Quran that everybody came to a consensus upon was with Hafsa. That was consulted, and copies were made, and with the consensus of the companions, making sure that the different ahruf, different styles can be accommodated the best that they could to be able to recite them. These were sent out to the different parts of the Muslim world. If the writing had to be standardized, then they would use the standard of Quraysh, the lisan of Quraysh, right? Because this is where it was originally revealed in that language, as Uthman radiallahu anh said. But he left off any such markings that would then hinder different recitations. So all of the different recitations, they all go back to that one Quran. Okay, now, when we talk about these recitations, these are qira'at. These are not ahruf. Ahruf and qira'at are not the same thing. Ahruf, as I said, harf being the edge of a spectrum, are the different developments from the different spectrums of the Arabic language. From that now, the great reciters of Quran, who memorize all of them, they would produce a style of reciting. And that would go back to the reciter, and we'll talk about that. Because those are many. Harf and qira'at are not the same thing. The ahruf accommodate the qira'at, meaning between those differences between the ahruf, which are all from Allah, they were all revealed through Jibreel, peace and blessings be upon him, to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. From that, the qurra, the reciters, they collected a recitation, which would be exactly from the revelation. And that recitation they taught to their students, word by word, letter by letter, pronunciation by pronunciation. There is no differentiation between the Quran. The Quran is one. Even the way you pronounce the Quran is preserved mutawatir, through numerous chains, authentically checked. How? Let's look at one of the recitations, which is Ibn Amir. Ibn Amir's recitation. If you look at it, here is the chain for that recitation. And it's in Arabic, but I will explain it in English. From Allah to Jibreel salam, to Rasulullah, to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, recited that entire method of reciting through the different ahruf to Abu Darda, the companions, even if they were from the Quraysh. Like we know the famous story of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, right? When he heard one of the Qurayshi Sahaba reciting differently, he took him back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet told him that this is the way it was revealed, meaning that they learned the different ahruf. The Sahaba, they learned the different styles, and they would use them in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught it to Abu Darda. Abu Darda is another one of the companions who had memorized the Quran. Also, others like Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu, others, we'll talk about them as well, inshallah. So Abu Darda radiallahu anhu here, he memorized this style. Here, Ibn Amir, the one that the recitation is named after, learned it directly from a companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there is not between him and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam except one companion. There's just one chain. He learned it directly, and he taught this. He's a Shami. In Sham, he taught this to his students and made sure that they pronounced every letter elongating and stopping where it needs to stop and so on, in the way that the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught him. And that style of recitation then became the qira'at of Ibn Amir. From the famous ones that are well known in the Muslim Ummah today, styles of recitation is what some people say Hafs. Hafs is actually not the Qari. Hafs and Shu'bah, they are the students who recite this from Asim. Asim is the actual reciter, and he's from Kufa. Here is the chain of narrators, right? So you have Asim, he learns this from a chain that takes it back to Uthman, Ali, and Ibn Masud, three of the famous great companions who had memorized the Quran, all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Now, there are differences in the recitations of Hafs and Shu'bah. Even though they both come from Asim, the Qari, he didn't just learn the Quran through one chain. He learned the different ahruf, and then he chose this recitation and taught it to his students, which made his qira'at. The qira'at come from the ahruf, from the difference between the ahruf, but they are the collection of that qari. So Asim, he took that recitation also from Abdullah ibn Habib all the way through Uthman, Ali, Ubay, Zayd ibn Thabit, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. So this is another style from a different chain, very short chains as well, from Asim, from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Jibreel, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here is another chain. All of the qira'at, all of the recitations in their style of reciting are mutawatir. They come through numerous chains, right? Look at the preservation of the Quran. Look at the accuracy, not just the words and letters. We have those manuscripts we have memorized, but even how you pronounce them. Today, if somebody wanted to recite the Quran in their local dialect of Arabic, let's say they wanted to recite it in the Egyptian dialect and they wanted to pronounce Jannah, Ganna, they cannot, right? If somebody wants to pronounce it in the Khaliji dialect and they want to pronounce Qul to be Gul, many of the Khalij, they pronounce the Qaf as Gaf, a Gullak, right? Or, for example, in the Khalij also, when they pronounce the Kaf in reference to when they're speaking to a woman, they say Cha. So كيف حالك becomes كيف حالك, right? This is not allowed in the Quran. Why? Because even the pronunciation has been preserved from the Prophet ﷺ, from Jibreel, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What eloquence, what preservation that is, right? So you see, these are some of the chains that are of Asim, the scholar and Qari of Kufa, and him going from Sa'ad, for example, here, going back to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud to the Prophet ﷺ. From that now, from the different ahruf that he learned, he taught the Qur'at to Hafs and Shu'bah. Hafs then became famous as a recitation which is used in most of the Muslim world, directly comes from the Prophet ﷺ through multiple chains. Another famous one is Nafi'. Nafi' from his students, from Qalun and Warsh. And this is, some people say Warsh Quran. There is no such thing as a Warsh Quran. The Quran is only the one Quran, the Quran that is written in the Rasam of Uthman radiallahu anhu. Now, Nafi' has a very strong recitation. Why? Because look at the chains. He doesn't have just one, not two, not three, not four, but many, many chains. I'm just going to give 4 of them here. Right? Here you will see Nafi', him getting the recitations with their chains from Abdullah ibn Abbas, going back to Zayd ibn Thabit and Ubay ibn Ka'ab. Now here, Abdullah ibn Abbas memorized the Quran directly from the Prophet ﷺ himself. But he also memorized the Quran through other companions to learn the different ahruf and different styles. And then Nafi', having memorized from all of those ahruf, taught a style to one of his students, which is Warsh Uthman, and that became famous as the recitation of Warsh. And also to Qalun, Isa, and this became famous al-Madani as the recitation of Qalun. Now those reciters, they memorized from Nafi' through mutawatir chains, meaning Nafi' then also has recitations that go through Abdullah ibn Abbas, through Ubay ibn Ka'ab, separately from the one that we mentioned earlier. He also has one that goes through Abu Huraira, from Ubay ibn Ka'ab to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Abdullah ibn Abbas from Ubay in a separate. Look at the numbers that are between them, they're different. So through all these different chains of narrators, Nafi' memorized the Quran from the Sahaba, from the Prophet ﷺ, from Jibreel, from Allah, and from those ahruf and differences, he put together his Qur'at and taught it to 2 of his students who standardized it, and you can get musahif that will help you, aid you, and be able to recite Warsh al-Qanun today. Now you have another thing, which is styles of writing, how to write the Quran. And many people, unfortunately, think that this means that there is a different Quran if it's written differently, right? We want to clarify this. The Arabic script has gone through stages, right? If you see on your screen today, number 1, this is a very early script, right? The Mus'haf of Uthman radiallahu anhu is going to be written in a script similar to this. You see there are no dots, there are no vowel sounds, meaning there's no sound that tells this is a oo or this is going to be stretched, which we call harakat, yani the fatha, damma, kasra, pesh, zabar, zair, all those kinds of things are not present here, right? This is pure Arabic writing in the early Hijazi Kufi script. And the Arab at that time, they would know that this is a ba or a fa or a qaf and so on, knowing that they would know this is a jim and this is a kha and this is a ha, and they didn't need the dots. As the non-Arabic speakers started to become the majority of the Muslim Ummah, they would not know how to pronounce some of these letters. And the great scholars like Abu Asad al-Duhili and others, and this is in the Khilaf of Ali radiallahu anhu, which is very early on, started to use dots not to differentiate letters from other letters, but rather to differentiate on how you pronounce the letters, how to make it a full mouth letter or a light letter, to pronounce it stronger or lighter, and so on. So this developed the Arabic language. That didn't change the meaning, it didn't change the words, it just added marks to be able to pronounce it easier. As we see that continue, for example, the shadda was added later, right? To know that this is a letter you should pronounce in a double sound. The Arab already did that, but this is for those who are not eloquent with the Arabic language, and then you see the dot under the ba and the noon being added later on. These letters were later standardized, and there's a process that it went through. So there wasn't always this way, right? They were later standardized, and this sequence of lettering, huruf al-hija, is memorized today around the Muslim world. Anywhere you go in the Muslim world, you will find alif, ba, ta, tha, jim, ha, kha, dal, dal, ra, za, sin, shin, sa, da, ta, and so on. You will see little rhymes to be able to memorize them for little kids, and the fa and the qaf will be written in this standard format today. Today, this is the standard format used. And styles of writing may be a little bit different, but the sequencing, for example, the Arabic letters under the Maghribi script used to be different. This was the Mashriqi script and so on. And this is the standard today. Now there are styles that were old style. The Mashriq style, Khat al-Mashriq, it will be stretched out. This, if you look at this, this is a stretched out. Today, for calligraphy, some people still use this, but this font is no longer used as a standard today, right? It would be very difficult for somebody who doesn't know that chapter to be able to read from this kind of writing without the dots and so on being as we are used to seeing nowadays. This one does have the dots and so on, but no fatha, dhamma, kasra and so on. This is not the standard of writing, but this is one of the earlier styles. We have the Hijazi script. Now, this Hijazi script was used very early on. But again, today, writing like this would be very difficult because there are no dots in this to know if this is a fa or a qaf or a jim or a ha. You would have to know the word itself. There is the Kufi script, and this you will find is a very classic script as well. Here, these dots that are added are not added for differentiating a fa and a qaf and so on. This is also for pronunciation purposes, right? You have the Tawqih script here. And this is also a classic script. You will notice something different about this script. If you look at the fi, the two dots are on top of the ya instead of the bottom and so on. This was used. It will not be used today, but this was used at a time, and today it will be used mostly in calligraphy and so on. Then you have the Andalusi script, and this is something that came up in a discussion or debate recently, and some of the people felt that maybe I wasn't aware of them, but of course we're aware of them. We study these in ulum of Quran and so on. The Andalusi scripts were a very later development in Andalus, where when Islam reached these areas, they started to develop different styles of writing for a people that were not native to Arabic. So you had a Mashriqi and a Maghribi, and there were slight differences. For example, in the Mashriqi, which became the standard, which is the standard today, the fa had the dot on top, and the Maghribi was on bottom. In the Mashriqi, there were two dots on top, and in the Maghribi, for the qaf, there was one dot. Now, this is not a difference in recitation of Warsh and Quran and Hafs and Qalun. Many people sent some messages to try to help, and they were like, oh, the Warsh Quran is written like this. That is a mistake. That is ignorance to say that. This is a style of writing. You can write the recitation of Hafs or Qalun or Wash or Qunbul or anything else, Ibn Kathir and Susi and Ibn Amir. Any one of them can be written in these different style of writing. Right? We do find some areas that recite Warsh still using the Maghribi script, but again, that is not a standard, and nor is that related to the Qur'at itself. And I will explain that inshallah. But here you will find between the Andalusi scripts, their styles of writing, you will find a difference in dotting and so on and so on. None of that changes the meaning. All of that has just to do with styles of writing. None of that is tied to the Qur'at itself. Is Warsh a writing style? Some people messaged me. Oh, in the Warsh Qur'an, this is your mistake. That is not true. When we look at this style, and this is some of the Islamophobes today trying to find ways to try to criticize the Quran when they cannot. Unfortunately, when they try, they put forward this saying this is the Warsh writing. And they wrote this, which they took from a script that is the Andalusi Maghribi script. In the Andalusi Maghribi script, this would be pronounced as Qutila. Right? But as you can see in this clip here,
All right, show me here.
right, good.
Why say qatal and fatal? Okay, what's the difference? Okay, yeah. Yeah. All right.
This is amazing.
Yeah, all right.
Hold
okay.
on. Back up.
Sure.
Back up.
Sure.
All right. Now look at this. What did he say? Why does it say what?
Fatal.
Fatal.
Yeah.
There is no riwayat with fatal.
Okay.
You're a liar.
Look, okay, that's
Now
fine.
you're caught.
No, that's
No,
not
no,
right.
no, 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 no. Let me speak now.
It's
Let
not-
me speak.
Okay.
This man is so ignorant.
Okay.
He is such a liar
Okay.
that his printouts are filled with lies. Now I'm going to show it to the world.
Okay.
The world's going to see kaisa jhoota banda hai.
Sure, okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, yeah.
Now, he says that in the recitation from Warsh, it says futila. Futila. And in the recitation from Hafs, it says qatila. Okay? He's laughing, and everybody's laughing
That's
because
okay.
there is no such Warsh recitation.
when I asked him to pronounce it, he pronounced it as a fa, right? Which is not in the Warsh recitation. This is a mistake. This is a lie. He made this up. There is no such letter used to put a fa in this word in the Quran. This is a copy from my own collection, my own library, and this is the Quran written with the markings to help recite in the way of Warsh. Warsh and Nafi'. And you will find here that this is written in the Mashriqi style, not the Maghribi style. So them saying that this is the Warsh writing and has some kind of a contradiction with the Hafs writing is just stupidity. This is not true. Malik is not Malik. It is written according to the way you recite with Warsh. But it is not using the Maghribi style. Here, I will show you what the Maghribi style does look like. And these both that you have on your screen are with the same recitation of Warsh. This is not Hafs and Warsh and Ibn Amir or Qalun. This is the same recitation, but it's written with two different scripts. The one on the left is written in the Maghribi script, and the one on the right is written in the Mashriqi, which has become the standard in the Ummah today, no matter which qira'at you're using. So, what does that tell you? That for them to make an accusation that there is a contradiction between Warsh and Hafs, and this is foolishness. These are just styles of writing. If he had recited it correctly, meaning if he had recited the fa, ta, la with the dot on top as qutila, I would have then explained to him the difference in writing, but he did not. Writing styles do not change the meaning. Meaning, just because there are different styles to write, from the Kufi script or the Andalusi scripts that come with Maghribi and Mashriqi and Mabsut and all the different types of scripts that we have, these are styles of writing. What I have in front of you right now are English writing. This is English. Today, as an English speaker, when I look at this, it's very hard for me to read this because we don't write like this today. But that doesn't mean that any of this is changed. You can write it in that style or today's style. You can write it in cursive of print. Like in English, we can write something in cursive, except for the younger generation. They don't know how to write cursive anymore. But if you write it in cursive or you write it in print, it doesn't change the meaning, right? As long as the meaning is preserved, the sounds and pronunciation is preserved, it does not change the meaning. And no doubt with the Quran, the sounds, the pronunciation, the word, all of that is preserved. Even if there is a difference in recitation, all of that, the different qira'at, will be proven authentically through multiple mutawatir chains, all the way back to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and through him, through Jibreel, back to Allah, Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of that will be in accordance to one Quran. There is only one Quran. That is the Quran, the collection that was standardized and sent out by Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, and before him, in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and before him, that Quran was written down in with different people in different areas and memorized word by word, letter by letter, from beginning to end in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Now, as digital technology develops, writing styles will be more computerized and so on, no Now, this will develop, styles of writing will develop, but all of that will be the same meaning, the same pronunciation. We have those Qurra that are still memorizing the Quran, word by word, letter by letter, pronunciation by pronunciation, with their chains of teachers accrediting them asanid all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And we still have those original manuscripts written in the Kufic and Hijazi scripts that are there, carbon dated, that we can always go back and consult and review to make sure that no letter, no word, not even the sounds can be altered from the message that was revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Jibreel alayhi salam to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Now, you may say that this is something that you have put forward, but the criticism of the Bible you put forward from Dr. Bart Ehrman, who is not a Muslim, who's not a Christian, he's an atheist, he's a scholar. What about that type of a neutral criticism of the Quran?
One of the reasons that I've had trouble with traditional Christianity is because of the changes that scribes have made in the text, but it's not the only thing. Another issue is the internal discrepancies that you find within the New Testament and within the Bible, and I do know that the Quran has been faithfully transmitted over the centuries, and for some reason Christians decided not to transmit their book as faithfully. But what I would say is that they certainly could have if they wanted to. There's not really not a lot to be done with the Quran, because I mean so many of these manuscripts are just the same. So there's not a lot of scholarship to do, because I mean with the New Testament though you have all these thousands of manuscripts that are all different from each other.
And in the case of Muslim apologists, the idea is that the Quran doesn't have any of these problems, and therefore Islam is a superior religion. I'll tell you where I would agree. When it comes to the New Testament Gospels and the entire New Testament, we have many thousands of copies, and they do have lots and lots of differences among them. Hundreds of thousands of differences among our copies of the New Testament, but most of those differences are completely insignificant. Like they don't matter for anything. We're counting like misspelled words and things like that. So they don't. But some of them do matter. They affect how you might understand a passage or a book or the entire New Testament. And the Quran's just not like that. Obviously, I mean, the Quran has been faithfully copied for many centuries. So that part is absolutely right.